So in the aftermath of this particular shooting in Colorado, and remember, this comes in the aftermath of this awful shooting in Atlanta, where a white guy shot 8 people, including 6 Asian Americans, and the media immediately, without any evidence, declared this as evidence of broader Trumpian white supremacy. Again, evidence that this is a hate crime, still completely absent in that particular case. Maybe it'll be found. Haven't been found yet. You'd figure you probably have found it by now if you were looking for it. But the media immediately jumped to the conclusion, after the Colorado shooting, the identity of the shooter was not immediately released to the media. Now, there's a pattern in the media. Okay, the pattern in the media tends to be that when the shooter is white, this is why conservatives held off on this. When the shooter is white, the identity is immediately released to the media, generally. Almost immediately, like within a couple of hours. Because once the guy's in custody, you got the guy in custody. So then it's just a question of when the police decide to reveal the identity of the person in custody. When the person is non-white, not only will the police wait on actually breaking the news, the media will then downplay exactly the race or ethnicity of the person. Because again, all of this plays into broader narratives about what the country should do, not with regard to things like immigration or things like race, God forbid, but what the country should do with regard to things like more policing, what sort of measures should be taken. Okay, but for the left, because every problem in America can be attributed to quote unquote white supremacy and whiteness, they immediately jumped into the story and got the story completely wrong. You have to understand that for the left right now, whiteness is what atheists say about religious people. They call it the God of the gaps. So atheists will frequently say about religious people that religious people can't prove God. They can't prove that God exists. So what they'll do is they'll look at the universe, and then if there's something unexplained, they'll say, God. Right? So quantum mechanics happens, and it completely throws off some Einsteinian theories about how the universe works, and religious believers will go, God. And atheists will say, no, that's not God. You just don't understand how that works. And God doesn't necessarily fill in that gap, right? That's the God of the gaps. Okay, well, for the left, they have whiteness and white supremacy of the gaps. If there is a story they don't like, they just explain it with regard to whiteness. We saw this with regard to discrimination against Asian Americans. Right? If black Americans are beating up Asian Americans in disproportionate numbers, that is because of white supremacy and America's systems of power. If Asian Americans are succeeding too well in the system, that's because Asian Americans are buying into systems of white supremacy. And if white people are targeting Asian Americans, that's also because of white supremacy. So no matter what, the grand unifying field theory of American politics for the left is white supremacy. So they tried to apply this without evidence to the Colorado shooting. This was their immediate jump. They immediately jumped into this was a white guy because there was a picture released and the guy looked white. Well, it turns out the guy's not white. The guy's actually Syrian. Okay, and it turns out that mass shooters are not always white. In fact, according to Statista, of the 120 or so mass shootings in the United States between 1982 and March 2021, about half of them are done by white people. But the other half are not done by white people, which is roughly the racial distribution of the United States generally. And so that myth is just not true in the first place, that all mass shooters are white. Okay, that is something that is promulgated by the media because the media wishes to suggest that white people with guns present the true threat to the United States. And blue checkmarks jumped into this immediately. Right? They started jumping into this like right away. They started tweeting out over and over and over that the shooter was white, and this just demonstrates that America is a white supremacist country. And also, because the police arrested this guy after wounding him, as opposed to just shooting him dead, that's because they liked him. The police were racist. It doesn't matter that a cop was actually shot to death by the guy. The police were racist because they liked the white guy, but they never take the black guy alive, which is just a lie. It is just overtly untrue. Okay, but you have some blue check, Julie DeCaro, who wrote, extremely tired of people's lives depending on whether a white man with an AR-15 is having a good day or not. Right? You have Alex Cole tweeting out, a white man walked into a grocery store in Boulder. Not true. Killed 10 people and was apprehended by the police and walked out of the building completely unharmed. Right down the street, police killed Elijah McClain while he apologized for not doing anything wrong. Okay, again, untrue. They thought that they thought that they had to give him a drug because he was responding in incoherent ways to their commands. It may, in fact, be a homicide case. I believe it's being brought as a homicide case right now. But what these two things have to do with each other, the answer is nothing. Qasim Rashid, Esquire, another blue check, he tweeted out, beyond infuriating that the Colorado terrorist killed a cop but was arrested alive, while cops shot Tamir Rice dead for holding a toy because the cop feared for his life. How is an unarmed black child more frightening than a grown white male mass murderer? Reckless. I don't understand. Were you there? What? Okay, so this is just the narrative that builds up every time, right? When the shooter in Charleston of the black church, right? The racist terrorist who shot up the black church, when he did that, he was arrested. And the narrative was, look at how the police are treating him so nicely. Well, the police tried to arrest a lot of people without killing them. If the police killed everybody who presented a general threat to the public, there'd be a lot more dead people in the United States of all races. But that doesn't matter. The narrative has to be promulgated. The narrative is always, again, white supremacy is the answer, even if it's clearly not white supremacy, as we'll see in a second. Michael Harriot of The Root, who's just awful, he tweeted out, pointing out how white suspects get the benefit of the doubt without being stopped, frisked, beaten, shot, or killed is not a call for harsh treatment. It simply means we know cops are capable of treating people humanely, just not us. Y'all could use a few more ass whoopings, though. He's just a bad person. I'm sorry, just a bad person. First of all, there is tape of white people being beat to death by police officers unjustifiably or shot unjustifiably by the police. In fact, there are studies done. It says that actually police tend to disproportionately shoot white suspects in dangerous situations as opposed to black suspects in situations. And that does not matter, apparently, at all. Not only does that not matter, it does not matter that the suspect in this case was not white. The suspect, Kamala Harris's niece, tweeted out about this and actually had to delete her own tweet about the white shooter. She tweeted out, the Atlanta shooting was not even a week ago. Violent white men are the greatest terrorist threat to our country. Violent white men are the greatest terrorist threat to our country. And then she tweeted out, I deleted a previous tweet about the suspect in the Boulder shooting. I made an assumption based on his being taken into custody alive and the fact that the majority of mass shootings in the United States are carried out by white men. Okay, so in other words, you made an assumption about some shooting based on general racial statistics? Interesting. Interesting you should do that. If you're on the left, you can get away with anything. Anything. By the way, solid apology right there. That is not even an apology. That's like, well, I made an assumption. First of all, you know what? The majority of people who live in this country are white, which means that for virtually any stat you can choose, the majority of people who do it are white. Okay, so the majority of people who eat hot dogs in the United States are white. So I saw a guy eating a hot dog. What color was he? Well, he's probably white because, what? What are you even talking about? It's statistical incompetence. Okay, so as it turns out, all of this immediately fell apart because, unfortunately for the left-wing narrative about how whiteness is the greatest threat to America, this particular gunman happened not to be white. He was a Syrian-born person. And not only that, he ranted about Islamophobes hacking his phone. He was apparently suffering from mental illness. The person's brother told the Daily Beast he was very antisocial and has been paranoid since high school. The brother described him as mentally ill, said he'd been bullied in school, and it was not politically motivated. His sister-in-law said she'd seen him playing with a gun recently, but did not suspect him of violence. And also, he tweeted out a bunch of stuff that was kind of supportive of ISIS over the past few years. He tweeted out about how Trump was terrible. This seems like a mentally ill person. Okay, and he ranted about Trump. He ranted about refugees. He happens to have been a Muslim, although we don't know that Islam was actually the motivation in the shooting. It looks more like mental illness. Okay, but in any case, this does not comport with the fact pattern that the left would like to promulgate. But that does not matter. And the left never acknowledges its own hypocrisy on this score. Ilhan Omar had just the best set of tweets on this. So Ilhan Omar tweeted out two things, right? So a week ago, after the Atlanta shooting, Ilhan Omar tweeted out, it isn't hard to understand why it's so normalized for law enforcement to protect the humanity of white mass murderers and their willingness to continually make excuses for them. And then, a week later, Ilhan Omar tweeted out, the shooter's race or ethnicity seems front and center when they aren't white. Otherwise, it's just a mentally ill young man having a bad day. Narratives drive our responses to awful crimes committed against innocent people. Pay attention to these responses and who is targeted. Literally a week ago, she was targeting the Atlanta shooting as race-based and talking about the race of the shooter. Now, you can't mention the race of the shooter because if you do, then you're targeting people based on race. It's unreal. So notice something here, okay? Notice that when the left uses racism as a charge or when they bring up white supremacy as a charge, all of this seems to be politically motivated. Pretty much all of it. Okay? It is a tool. They can charge their opponents with racism and then be as racist as they could possibly want to be. Even if the evidence doesn't back the position. This is twice in the course of 2 weeks that the left got the narrative completely wrong, and it's still going to be rammed down America's throat. In Atlanta, the narrative was that it was white supremacy that was behind the shooting, and that it was connected to Trump and the Wuhan virus and all of this kind of stuff, and it wasn't true. There's no evidence of it. And then the entire media jumped on the idea that this guy was treated in Colorado with kid gloves because he was white, and it turns out he wasn't even white. Again, it's all about power. Whatever is the brickbat at hand, you have to use it. Did you know that every like on this video creates one additional leftist tier? Don't ask me why. That's called science. To take advantage of this amazing opportunity, hit the like button.